Hey, my name is Emma Bufalini, and I'm here to share my Excel sheet for accounting for my massage business. I know a lot of massage therapists out there are asking how others do their accounting, and a lot of people say you have to hire an accountant or use some kind of product or service. And I'm here to show you that you can actually do it with this very simple online Excel sheet. This form is something that I've developed over a couple years of owning a business, and I'm happy to show you how it works. It's going to be specific to my uses, but it's pretty simple to go in there and fix some of the minor details to make it fit your business. So let's start all the way on the left. We're going to have some different categories we'll go over, but we're going to start with the date and your client information. So this is where I record all of my sessions. I do individual sessions on this sheet. You could always change it to be a daily count, or depending on how you run your business, if you have employees, you can switch it over to who your employee worked on that day. So I have the date, I have the name of the person receiving the session, and then I have a drop down menu here that has a session length from 30 to 2 hours. You can actually click this little button at the bottom. The little marker is an editing button, and you can change those to fit what services you actually offer. If you offer more than just time, if you offer different kinds of services, you can actually put those in this list as well. The payment box is something that's a type in for me because I do have different kinds of discounts and services that I offer that have different prices. So it's easier to type it in than it is to have an extensive list of prices when I could just type a number. The next two are your card tips and your cash tips. These are separated this way because when it comes to writing yourself a check at the end of the month, or if you have an employee, your card tips are usually something that you include in that, and your cash tips are not. Usually, cash tips, I get them right away and they go right into my own piggy bank. They don't go into the business coffers at all. So I don't have to worry about writing out a check for those. So that's why they're separated, but you can decide to join those together or not. It also makes it easier to track which ones have a cost when it comes to the square tax here. So if they tipped on the card, it's going to change the calculation. If they tipped in cash, it doesn't change the calculation. This is a payment type, so I have quite a few different options for the way that people can pay me. They can pay me as card, cash, check, a benefits card, which is similar to like a card on file, a gift card, which is usually calculated elsewhere. Again, that's that COF is card on file. Invoice is similar to that benefits card and calculation. And then PP is prepay. So I prepay split card and prepay split cash, where they have paid half of it with a card online before they saw me. So it's run with an invoice. And then the other half is run either in person or handled with cash. So it's a dual transaction that gets calculated separately and then put together at the end. Packages are something where I may have that recorded on a different page, and then PP full is prepaid full, so it's treated similar to the invoice. These all have a different kind of calculation that's actually in the square section. So you'll notice at the very top, this line of code is a little bit long. ChatGPT actually helps with this. So if you have to adjust this for whatever system you're using, I use Square to transaction with my cards. You might use Toast, or you might use Clover or something else that charges a different amount. You can go into these and actually change the amounts and how many ways you have to process. And you can actually ask ChatGPT to help you with that. But up here it has all the calculations for me. So depending on what I put into the lines over here between D and G, it will do the math for me and tell me what Square took. If I'm ever uncertain, I can always check with Square and see how they ran it and then take that calculation and readjust it. Over here, the type is the type of service. So I actually have in office, I have house calls, and I have chair massage events. So I have a drop down menu here just for tracking all of that stuff. I also have FM for first massage, so I can track how many new clients I get, as well as no shows, and then trades. So if I do professional trades, like with a hairstylist or another massage therapist, I have that option to track that here too. So you can again go to that little edit button at the bottom and change that as well. And then in the referral source, we have different options for the ways that people have found me. So I have the internet or Google searches, referrals, which is like an individual word of mouth. The right stuff is my local newspaper, the Chamber of Commerce, Facebook, other, and car sticker. Like I have my name across the back of my car. You can edit this list if you have other options that you use for marketing. And then that way you can actually track where you're coming from. Under the notes, if someone has a referral that's a word of mouth, I'll usually write their name under the notes section here at the end. So that's a quick and dirty rundown of the beginning. That's just a tracking of each individual section. When we get to that right, we're going to have a little bit more complicated, but it's going to be mostly in the formulas that's complicated. It's pretty straightforward looking at it. So on the right in these boxes here, these are going to be our overall formulas. So this table hours income is going to be what we earned on just the payments for sessions for the year. So it goes D2 to D, so that goes all the way down the page. It'll add together every session you have in that column. The chair and vendor events is actually a pullover from another page. So that events with the exclamation mark means that it's referring to another page in the sheet, which is down here. So I'll show you that in a minute. But what it's doing is it's pulling over the sum from that page and it's putting it here. And then the gross income is going to be those together. So M2 and N2 is your gross income for those two categories together. So when I talk about your gross income, I'm not including tips because, again, you may have other people working for you, and that's a little bit different, and tips are paid different than your overall income for your business because that's a personal income. Underneath that, you're going to have your tips totals separately. So you have chair and vendor event tips. So that's going to be, again, that events exclamation mark. That's going to refer to a different page. The cash and card tips are going to be here as well. And then that's going to be your total. And then underneath that, you're going to have your expenses for the year. So your square taxes are going to be pulled from the same page where we had them before over here in line H. Your expenses are going to come from your expense sheet. So it's going to say expenses with the exclamation mark. It's going to pull it off that third sheet in the row down here. And then you're going to have your adjusted sales, which is your gross income minus your expenses and square tax. So if I highlight that, it's going to highlight the gross income in those two boxes. So that's the formula you got there. It's going to automatically update this with every line that you put in. And then based on that, it's going to give you projected taxes. So here I put projected taxes at 0.15, which is 15% of your income. And the reason why I put that is because that's roughly what I've been paying on my gross income here. So I've been calculating it that way, but you may want to change that. So the 0.15 is 15. If you need to change it to 30 or something else, you can just change that out for a different number. You just go in there and point whatever you put after it, that's your percent. Underneath that, I have a little grid with the square tax expenses and the different ways that you can key it in, just as a quick guideline to reference if I ever need it. And then my gift cards are held on a different page over here. So they're not counted in my yearly income on this page, but I usually port them in from a different page later on in the process, especially when I'm doing my taxes. Underneath, you have a monthly recording. So this will actually track your income for the month a little bit simpler and allow you to see it broken down. So business income is, again, those sessions. So it's just what people are paying column D for their sessions. You're going to have your square taxes, so the cost of what you've used to process square expenses. Your expense column is going to have information from another page where you can just literally copy that number over. Or you can do the equal sum and then expense exclamation mark and put your total section there. But it's a little simpler to just write it in. You have your tips as well. So these are tips, both the cash and the card together. And then I have a column for the number of hours worked because my formula is 50% times the number of hours, or $45 is the equivalent. So if I have an hour sheet here, I can go to the income and it will actually calculate my hours times that $45 an hour and then give me a calculation at the end of it. And then you also have chair and vendor event. I usually write in cash here for how much I've earned for those events, but you can also do another formula by hours if you wanted to change it. But I usually do a cash amount because those are occasional. And there's another page on this form to follow that as well. At the end of every month, I usually write in the last line. So you see that formula is D2 to D36. So that means that D36 was the last time I changed that number. But say that Susie Q was the last appointment I had this month, I can make it D6 and it will only calculate up to that number. So if I put end of month, so that end of month, and then it will tell me that that's the end of it when I start adding more numbers. Like I'm going to show you real quick. If I add a 5 here, it's not going to show up there. It's not going to calculate it in because that's the end of the equation. Over here, I would then change it to be that next line. So it would be D8 that it's following and so on. So you can kind of see how it moves the graph down. It starts calculating from the next month over. So you can use that to follow your monthly income. And then at the bottom of that is going to be a list of your yearly. So it's going to calculate the whole year all the way down the page. Underneath that, I have $10 in the bank balance just so that there's a number there, but you can put whatever your year started with because usually you'll have rollover in a business and then you have quarterlies. So this will break down what taxes you owe to the EFTPS quarterly. And then there's one other cool thing that's to the right is these different graphs actually show you based on all of that information you put into the first chunk, it shows you the breakdown so you can see a visual version of all of that information. What session length is the most popular, how people pay the most often, what types of session and where are they the most popular, how did you get found? And then I have a list of how many hours or how many sessions my clients have booked. It's just a great way to visualize some of your information. I also have a monthly tracker that pulls that data out of that grid and then shows me a visual line of how I'm doing throughout the year. The next page in this is going to be your events. So for example, I put down Teacher Appreciation Day at St. Bosco's. We did a 3-hour Teacher Appreciation Day for $100, say, and they gave me $10 in tips. This is just a good way to track your events. So you can actually pull that number over if you wanted to, this number. You could pull this number over if you wanted to put that into that grid. And the way you would do that is through either an equation or you could just take that number and say it's 100, go in here and type in $100. Let me show you that real quick. So you could either do $100 in there, or you could take that and go equals sum EVENTS exclamation mark. And then we're going to go find out what square that was in. So that was F2. So we're going to go events F2. And it's going to show that $100 again. So that pulls that events over. The next is expenses. I have a reminder. This is this year's 2024 number that has come across a lot. So if you do laundry, every load counts for $5.25 of cost. You can also do that through utilities and soap costs, or you can just use the flat rate. This is where you track your information on what you've purchased and your expenses. So again, on the left, it starts with the date, the item you bought, how much you bought it for, and the seller, and what account you used for that expense. So for example, I could say I bought sheets today on Amazon. I bought 2 sets of sheets for $40 and I used my massage therapy's business debit card. The reason why the account is important is some people have more than one card for their business, or they might accidentally use their own personal card, which I've done before. This just lets you track what account that expense is going to show up in so that you can make sure that when you have enough information in there so that you can track where these came from, you could find it again and you can pay yourself back if you make any mistakes. You can then see to the right, this rainbow color, which you can change yourself as well, is going to be the breakdown of different categories when you do your taxes. This is the breakdown from last year on TurboTax. So they may change them ever so slightly each year, depends on what software you use as well. But the categories are advertising and websites, event fees, food, travel, driving, and parking, memberships, taxes and licenses, supplies, office expenses, CE, maintenance, utilities, miscellaneous, and contract labor. Sometimes continuing education just falls under miscellaneous, but it depends on how your software processes it. So advertising and website is pretty straightforward. Your event fees are things like if you do, say, like a event at a festival or something like that where you're paying a booth fee. Food is if you're traveling, if you're paying for events, meeting up with other business associates, if you are bringing food to some kind of event that you're throwing, all of that goes there. Travel, driving, and parking. If you live in a large city, you might be parking and paying for parking near wherever your clients are living. You may have tolls that you have to pay along the way, or you may have gas and repairs for your car that all goes there. The memberships are things like the Chamber of Commerce or the AMTA or AMBP. Taxes and licenses are things like your city and county taxes, your city and county licenses, and things like that that you may pay to practice in the area. Um, Supplies and office expenses. A lot of people ask me, why are there two of those? So the way I break down our supplies are things that are consumable. So things like paper towels, bleach, laundry detergent, paper, pencils, things like that. Office supplies are things like my computer, my desk, my table, things that I'm going to use for a couple years or that have a long lifespan. So if I bought like a new printer, I'd put it in office expenses. If I bought paper, I'd put it in supplies. And you can get as specific as you'd like with this, or you can keep it in simple uh, columns. CE is self-explanatory. Maintenance is usually things like I hired a plumber or I had my table refurbished or something like that. Utilities is self-explanatory. Miscellaneous is anything else that doesn't fall into the other categories. And then contract labor are things like if you did hire people, like say you hired a kid to run your booth at the event to like check people in and out so that you didn't have to run your square. Or if you hired a plumber to do a big construction project on your office to make sure that, your plumbing didn't fail this year, that could go into the contract labor. These are all different categories for things like that. And then what you can do is you can actually just copy that over and you can create a running list where it will give you the total for each category at the top here on that line two at the end of the year if you put it in each category to begin with. But just a simple way to track it. I like color. It helps me differentiate the lines when I'm pulling things across. You can always change that for yourself, but this is just an easy way to track your expenses and have it automatically do the math for what categories are what by the end of the year. I have another page for cancellations. I like to track them. It's up to you whether or not you do. But I have, the date that they canceled, the date of the appointment, their name, and then why they canceled. So no call, no show, last minute, sick and COVID, timely, or if I canceled on them. I have a line so that I can check whether or not I got them rescheduled and then why they may have canceled if it was in specific. I have a line for charity. This is just another category for taxes. As are at the very end here, I have inventory and losses. These are two different pages you can use as well to track those kinds of things. There's a mileage log if you're driving. You can track your odometer start and end, or you can track your distance in miles, as well as where you went and what you were doing. Just keep in mind if you go anywhere between business and non-business, then that leg of the trip doesn't count. So if I go from my office to a client and then I go pick up ice cream on the way back to the office, picking up the ice cream, unless it was for the office, doesn't count as business. And then I can't count that leg back. But if I go from the office to my client to my office, or an office to a client to another client to an office, all of those legs count because they're related to the purpose of the business. So keep that in mind. That's why the one way and the round trip are important here. You can just check whether or not you went directly to a certain area and back or not. The prepaids are one way to track whether or not you're keeping up with these. It's just an easy way to do it. I sell packages of 6. I write in the date when they use one. So like if we said Susie Q bought 6 60 minutes, I write the date when she used them. So that way I know exactly how many she has remaining. And if she ever asks, when did I use those? I know exactly when it is. And that's just a way to keep track of it. I have this as well. So check number that just tells me how they paid. And if I ever need to reference it, it's there, but I usually don't use that. Remaining is useful only if you're going to have to repay somebody for the session. So, for example, I had some packages left over when I moved here, and I calculated what I had remaining from that package and refunded it at the end of the year. But usually that's just good for checking how many you have left if you're not sure and someone hasn't been in a while. So that's our pretty simple thing. Mostly I don't use the inventory and losses. That's why they don't have any information in them and that I'm going to share, but they're there just in case you do have those kinds of things in your company. But I hope that this is helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at EmmaLaniMT. That's M like massage and T like therapy at gmail.com. You can always ask me questions. And yes, there is a second page that will have all of the calculations on it for you. I will also show you one more thing. So I talked about that edit button. When you bring up that edit, it's going to give you the page for data validation. So you can just go in here and you can change these here, and they will give you information on like what the different word is that you can put into that drop down menu. You could change the color format of it. You can even add more or remove certain ones of them. This is called a data validation rule. That's how you fix it. And then it tells you what part of the form. So appointments is the page we're on, and then J2 is the cell we're in. And then it will apply to range. You can actually add it to an entire column at the same time. So if I said like add another set Instagram, when I add that one, it's going to ask me, do I want to change it to all of them or just this one? So I'll say apply to all. And then it's going to, when I go down the list, say down here, it's going to show up in the list as a clickable option. The other thing is when you're doing this, if you're a quick typer, you can actually add information. So you can say type in the date, click tab, type in the name, click tab, hit enter, and then click the down button until you get to the correct one. And when you click enter, it's going to drop you down. And then you can type in the payment. You can type in the tips. And if you click tab or the right button, it will move you right. And when you hit enter, it's going to drop that list down. You can go all the way down with that down and up button. So it's just a quick way to key things in. If you are an efficiency person, that's one way you can do it. So you can actually use your keys instead of having to click the buttons with a mouse. Just a cool little tip. All right, hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. You can also use ChatGPT, by the way. For this calculation, ChatGPT was quite helpful. But, let me know if this is helpful. If it's not, you can always let me know and we can get you through trying to adjust it for your new needs. Thanks.